RV owners, when something stops working in your RV, like this light, the first thing that most of you guys know to do is to go look for your fuses. And as most of you know, you're going to find those fuses right here in your power distribution box. You have your breakers for all your 120 volt AC devices, and then you have fuses for all your 12 volt DC devices. 12 volt DC devices being things like your 12 volt refrigerator, your lighting, slide rooms, awnings, control boards for things like your air conditioner. Those are all going through a fuse. It's what's protecting the circuit. So if the fuse blows, things stop working, which is why you go looking for them. But oftentimes I end up at service calls for people who say they've checked the fuses, done all the basics, and you get there and I still find a fuse that's blown. And it's not because they missed one inside the power distribution panel. It's simply because these manufacturers like to hide fuses behind things in places they should not be, and then just forget to tell you where they are. But today I'm going to tell you the most common places you will find some of those hidden fuses. So if you've been chasing that crazy power issue in your RV, take a look in these places, see what you find. Now the first one here is going to be the radios. Most of these radios have an inline fuse or a fuse built into the back of the radio. Now most of these radios, you should be able to pop that cover off. You'll have some screws in there, pop those out, and you will find a fuse right behind there. Now for the next one, and this is going to be a more common one, this is going to be for awnings, water pumps, awning lights, outside lights. You will find fuses in one place for that, and it is the first place I look when I'm looking for a mystery fuse. And that is going to be at your control panel. Now a lot of you guys have one of these kind of right in the doorway, especially in travel trailers. You'll have a lot of your light switches, some of your slide switches here. If you pop the screws off this panel and pull it out, oftentimes you will find at least one inline fuse back there, sometimes a few of them. Now the next one's going to be right above that in this model, but your solar controller may be other places. If you have factory installed solar, you'll oftentimes find a fuse located behind here. But also note, for those pre-wired solar systems, you could find a fuse in a really inconvenient place, which is going to be up on the roof underneath the plate for your solar connection. So where your panels are connected to at the roof, that little roof gland, if you remove all the sealant and pull it up, odds are you're going to find a fuse underneath there as well. The next one is going to be your 12 volt refrigerators, and this is the one I honestly get called about the most. Your 12 volt refrigerators are oftentimes wired directly to the battery. Sometimes they do go through the power distribution center, but in a lot of newer ones they're going directly to the battery, and there's circuit protection in between. But there's also a fuse sometimes located behind this refrigerator, or sometimes if you remove some of these lower grills, you'll have access to a small fuse holder underneath here as well. But you may find it outside of the RV as well, and we're going to get out there and take a look at some common places you will find a different type of circuit protection or fuse. As far as the little blade fuses, again, sometimes they're around the RV, behind panels, behind different compartments and things, but the most common ones again are going to be the ones behind your switch panels, radios, control panels, and then the ones underneath or behind the refrigerator. But now for the outside, specifically on travel trailers, let's look at a really common place you'll find inline fuses and resettable breakers. Now before I get down there laying down, this is a resettable breaker. This is what you're looking for. A resettable breaker is often used on the 12 volt systems, and it is meant to overload and trip, if you will, but then reset itself. You'll find them a lot for awnings, slide rooms, 12 volt refrigerators. You'll find them on your power stabilizers, but these are the places you're going to look for them. Sometimes up near the A-frame, right up here on the front, you might see a couple of them. If you come underneath the A-frame, you may find some along your frame here. But what they've been doing recently, which I can't be mad at because they're getting them out of the elements, is they're actually putting them up in the underbelly. Now this particular model at least gives you an access panel to get up in here and access those. Another example of fuses up at the A-frame, if you look here, right where the 7-way connects, there is a small green block. This is actually a fuse holder, and you will find a fuse inside of that fuse holder right there. I went ahead and slid underneath another travel trailer that has an open belly so that you can see kind of what you're looking at here. Now, these gray things, like I showed you here, those are your resettable breakers. Sometimes they have a little button on the top or bottom here that you can push to reset them. Most of these are auto resetting though. The problem is when it's being abused and overloaded too often, eventually they just stop resetting and they'll stop passing power through. And you can test this just like any other fuse. You go from prong to prong, you can check for continuity, you can check for voltage on both sides, and you can verify if this is good the same way that you would check a standard fuse. You know, if you've got a setup like this, which a lot of you do, it would not be a terrible idea to come waterproof some of these connections. They sell a battery terminal spray, that red spray. It looks like they sprayed a little bit on there, not nearly enough, and try and protect some of those terminals. Because half the time I find something not getting power from these, it is simply because the wire ends have corroded off. Now, another place that you're going to find those resettable breakers are going to be at your power stabilizers, like these ones here. The Lippert power stabilizers that usually have a switch on the outside. You'll see that we have the wires coming from the switch, and they go into the underbelly, which sucks because that breaker is now in the underbelly. Now again, it's kind of hard to say that sucks because I've complained for years about how they leave those things exposed to the elements, but if you're going to try and make that waterproof, like let's at least use waterproof connections on the switches instead of those bell caps. Most of the time though, where you're going to find that breaker is going to be right up here on the frame, somewhere in this area, so you can check that out if your stabilizers just happen to stop working all of a sudden. If you are putting them down and you're overusing them trying to lift the unit, they will often trip. Wait 30 seconds and try it again. Odds are that resettable breaker is just doing its job and protecting it from overcurrent. Now, if I made this video 2 years ago, every single one of those resettable breakers I showed you that was hidden away in the underbelly would have been on the frame exposed. It's something I complained about for a long time. I'm sure I'm not the only person, because there's a lot of issues with those corroding from being beat with the elements driving down the road. Some good and some bad came out of that, because obviously now they're protected from the elements, but they're a little more difficult for you to get to. And again, fuses, breakers, any kind of circuit protection should always be easily accessed. Now, if you have a big fifth wheel like this one, odds are you're gonna end up finding a lot of those breakers up here in your front compartment, especially near your hydraulic pump and all this stuff. There are quite a few pieces of circuit protection in here, including some different style ones. But in a fifth wheel, this might be one of the first places you look, because sitting right here, I can count no less than 10 different types of circuit protection. Now, if you took anything from this video, I hope it's that if you have an electrical issue and there's no blown fuse in the box, that you don't automatically just go to worst case scenario and think something's terribly wrong, because not all of your fuses are going to be located in your power distribution panel. But let's exercise some caution too. If you do find a blown fuse, a breaker that's melted, keeps tripping, something's wrong with it, there is an underlying issue. Anything that ever blows a fuse, first question is always what caused that fuse to blow. But in an RV, I can tell you that blown fuses for no reason are pretty common, and that's because the batteries die. On certain things, like your 12-volt refrigerators, if your battery gets too low, the amperage starts to rise on that circuit, and eventually it will trip that fuse, and it's all just because the refrigerator was running when the battery got down to 10 or 11 volts. So on those situations, there's not actually an issue. Just make sure you're doing your due diligence and looking into things like that, because 9 times out of 10, fuses don't blow for no reason. I can also tell you that 9 times out of 10, that fuse you've been hunting for probably isn't in that power distribution panel, so you gotta get out and do a little bit of investigating. And I hope this video helped you find some of those areas that hidden fuse might be. If you want to see more tech tips, tricks, and even some tours in RVs like this one, make sure you guys are pressing that subscribe button.